remember the day Emily disappeared like it was yesterday. It was a cold October morning in 2015, and I was standing by my locker waiting for her. Emily and I had this routine. We'd meet by our lockers every morning, chat about the weekend, and then head to homeroom together. But that day, Emily never showed up. At first I thought she might be running late. I sent her a quick text. "Hey, where are you?" No response. It wasn't like Emily to ignore her phone, but I shrugged it off, figuring she'd catch up with me later. As the day went on, though, my worry grew. She missed all her classes, and by lunchtime, I was really concerned. After school, I decided to go to Emily's house. Her mom, Mrs. White, answered the door, looking as worried as I felt. "Is Emily home?" I asked, hoping against hope she'd just decided to skip school. Mrs. White's face went pale. "I thought she was with you," she replied, her voice trembling. That's when the panic really set in. Mrs. White tried calling Emily's phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail every time. She called the school and was told Emily hadn't been to any of her classes that day. With a sinking feeling in her stomach, Mrs. White called the police. The Riverbend Police Department launched an immediate search. They questioned everyone, friends, family, teachers, but no one had seen or heard from Emily since the previous evening. Her phone's last known location was near the edge of the forest, but searches of the area turned up nothing. Days turned into weeks, and the whole town grew increasingly anxious. Missing posters of Emily were everywhere. The local news covered her story nonstop, and the hashtag #FindEmilyWhite trended on social media. Despite all this attention, no new leads emerged. I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. Emily was my best friend. I started a blog, documenting every detail I could gather about Emily's life and the events leading up to her disappearance. I interviewed classmates, neighbors, and even distant relatives, piecing together a timeline. One day, while combing through old posts on Emily's social media accounts, I found something odd. There were a series of private messages from an account I didn't recognize. The messages were friendly at first, but grew increasingly insistent about meeting up. Emily had never mentioned this person to me, and the account had been deleted shortly after she disappeared. I brought this information to the police. They traced the IP address of the deleted account to a nearby town. It turned out the account belonged to a man named David Rogers, a former janitor at our high school who had been fired for inappropriate behavior towards students. Rogers was brought in for questioning. He denied any involvement in Emily's disappearance, claiming he had only talked to her online and never met her in person. But his story didn't add up, and the police found inconsistencies in his alibi. As pressure mounted, Rogers finally broke down. He confessed to meeting Emily the night before she disappeared. He said he had lured her to his house under the pretense of helping her with a personal problem. Things took a dark turn and Emily tried to leave. In a panic, Rogers restrained her, and in the struggle, Emily was injured. Terrified of the consequences, Rogers drove Emily's unconscious body to the forest and left her there, hoping she would wake up and find her way home. But Emily never did. Her body was found in a shallow grave a few miles from where her phone had last pinged. The news of Emily's fate devastated our town. Her family and friends were left to mourn the loss of a bright young life taken too soon. My blog became a tribute to Emily, sharing stories and memories from those who knew and loved her. The community rallied together, raising awareness about online safety and ensuring that Emily's legacy would never be forgotten. Emily's disappearance changed Riverbend forever. Her story serves as a grim reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows and the importance of vigilance in protecting our loved ones. Though the town will never be the same, Emily's legacy continues to be a beacon of hope and a call for justice. I'll never forget the day we discovered the abandoned locker. It was in the fall of my sophomore year at Westfield High School, and the mystery surrounding it still gives me chills. It all started when our principal announced that some old lockers in the East Wing would be reassigned to accommodate the growing student population. The East Wing had been closed off for years, ever since a tragic accident involving a student named Mark Thompson. Mark was a senior who had mysteriously vanished without a trace one day after school, and the whole wing had been locked up as part of the investigation. When the investigation went cold, the area was simply forgotten, a place where the curious dared not tread. The reopening of the East Wing was big news, and my friends and I couldn't resist the urge to explore it. After school, we sneaked past the caution tape and wandered through the dusty corridors. Everything was eerily quiet, and the air felt heavy with a sense of forgotten history. That's when we stumbled upon Locker 109. Locker 109 was different from the others. While most were rusted and covered in cobwebs, this one looked almost new. The lock was missing and the door hung slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of us and we opened it. Inside, we found an old, worn-out journal and a few personal items, a keychain, some pens, and a faded photograph of a boy about our age. The journal belonged to Mark Thompson. My heart raced as I flipped through the pages. Most of the entries were mundane, talking about classes, friends, and his plans for the future. But towards the end, the entries grew darker and more cryptic. Mark wrote about feeling watched, about hearing whispers in the halls, and about seeing a shadowy figure lurking near his locker. One entry, dated a week before his disappearance, stood out. I don't know what's happening, but I'm scared. Every time I turn around, it feels like someone's there, watching me. I tried to tell Mr. Jenkins, but he just brushed me off. I need to find out who or what it is before it's too late. We were all creeped out but fascinated. Who was this Mr. Jenkins? And what had Mark discovered that led to his disappearance? Determined to find answers, we decided to investigate further. The next day, we went to the school library and dug up old yearbooks. Mr. Jenkins had been a history teacher at Westfield High, but he had retired shortly after Mark vanished. We found his address and decided to pay him a visit. Mr. Jenkins lived in a small, cluttered house on the outskirts of town. He seemed surprised to see us but invited us in when we explained why we were there. His face grew somber when we mentioned Mark. Mark was a good kid, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. He was curious, always asking questions, but he got too close to something he shouldn't have. We pressed him for details, and he reluctantly told us about a secret society that had existed at Westfield High many years ago. The society was made up of students and some faculty members who believed in the occult. They conducted rituals in the East Wing, and Mark had stumbled upon their activities. Mr. Jenkins had tried to protect him, but he couldn't. He came to me with his fears, Mr. Jenkins said, his hands trembling. I told him to stay away, but he was determined to uncover the truth. I never saw him again after that. Our minds raced with possibilities. A secret society, occult rituals, and a student who got too close to the truth. This was more than we had bargained for. We thanked Mr. Jenkins and left, our heads spinning with questions. Back at school, we decided to search the East Wing more thoroughly. Late at night, armed with flashlights, we sneaked back in. We scoured every corner, every classroom, and every storage room. In one of the old science labs, we found a hidden trapdoor under a loose floorboard. The trapdoor led to a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. We hesitated, fear gnawing at our resolve, but curiosity won out. We climbed down, our flashlights piercing the thick gloom. At the bottom, we found a small, musty room filled with strange symbols and old, dusty books. In the center of the room was an altar, and on it lay another journal, this one belonging to Mr. Jenkins. It detailed the activities of the secret society, the rituals they performed, and the terrible price they paid for dabbling in the dark arts. Mark's name appeared in the final entries, confirming our worst fears. We took photos of everything and left the room, our minds reeling. The next day, we went to the police with our findings. The authorities reopened the case, and soon, the entire town was buzzing with the news of the secret society and Mark's tragic fate. The East Wing was permanently sealed off, and the school brought in counselors to help students and staff cope with the revelations. Mark's family finally had some closure, knowing what had happened to their son. As for my friends and me, we were changed forever by what we had discovered. The abandoned locker, the journal, and the hidden room had revealed a dark chapter in our school's history. We vowed to remember Mark, and to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. The mystery of the abandoned locker had been solved, but the shadows of the past still lingered in our minds, and every time I walked past the East Wing, I couldn't help but feel a chill, remembering the secrets that lay buried within those walls. High school can be a stressful time, but for our valedictorian, Rachel Green, it was a pressure cooker. She was brilliant, driven, and seemed to have the perfect life. But as we all learned during our senior year, appearances can be deceiving. Rachel had always been at the top of our class at Maplewood High School. She was president of the student council, captain of the debate team, and had already been accepted to several Ivy League schools. She had a reputation for being meticulous and reliable, so when she failed to show up for her speech rehearsal for graduation, everyone knew something was wrong. It was a rainy afternoon when I received a call from our principal, Mr. Thompson, asking if I had seen Rachel. I hadn't, and neither had any of our friends. Panic set in quickly. Rachel's parents were out of town on a business trip, and she had been staying with her aunt, who reported that Rachel had left for school that morning but never returned. The police were called, and a search was launched. Rachel's car was found parked near the school, but there was no sign of her. Her phone was off, and no one had heard from her since that morning. The entire school was on edge, and rumors began to spread like wildfire. As Rachel's close friend and fellow member of the student council, I took it upon myself to help in the search. I teamed up with a few friends, and we started retracing Rachel's steps. We talked to everyone who had seen her that day, but no one could provide any useful information. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. One evening, while going through some old photos, I remembered something odd Rachel had mentioned a few weeks earlier. She had been working on a secret project, something she was very excited about but refused to share any details. I figured it might be a lead, so I decided to investigate further. I went to Rachel's house and asked her aunt if I could look through Rachel's room. She agreed, and as I sifted through Rachel's meticulously organized notes and journals, I found a hidden compartment in her desk. Inside, there was a small notebook labeled Project Phoenix. The notebook was filled with notes, diagrams, and references to various scientific articles. Rachel had been working on a groundbreaking research project involving quantum computing and artificial intelligence. The more I read, the more I realized this was no ordinary school project. Rachel had discovered something significant, something that could revolutionize the field. The last few entries in the notebook were frantic, almost paranoid. Rachel wrote about being followed, about receiving strange emails, and about her research being stolen. She mentioned meeting someone who claimed to be from a prestigious research institute, but who gave her an uneasy feeling. With this new information, I went to the police. They took Rachel's concerns seriously and began looking into her research and any potential threats she might have faced. Meanwhile, I continued my own investigation, determined to find my friend. I contacted a few of Rachel's colleagues from the science club, and one of them, Jake, mentioned that Rachel had been corresponding with a professor from a nearby university. We decided to visit the professor, Dr. Mason, to see if he knew anything. Dr. Mason was shocked when we told him about Rachel's disappearance. He confirmed that he had been mentoring her on her project and that Rachel had indeed made a significant breakthrough. He also revealed that Rachel had confided in him about feeling threatened and had asked for advice on how to protect her research. Dr. Mason showed us some of the emails Rachel had received. They were from an unknown sender, full of cryptic messages and veiled threats. One email, sent just a day before she vanished, contained coordinates and a warning to stop her research. Using the coordinates from the email, we located an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The police agreed to investigate, and we joined them, desperate for answers. The warehouse was dark and eerie, but we pressed on, searching for any sign of Rachel. In one of the back rooms, we found a makeshift lab. There were computers, research papers, and a few personal items that belonged to Rachel. But Rachel herself was nowhere to be found. The place looked like it had been hastily abandoned. Just as we were about to leave, we heard a faint noise coming from a locked closet. The police forced the door open, and there she was. Rachel, scared and disheveled but alive. She had been locked in the closet for over 24 hours with no food or water. Rachel was taken to the hospital, where she was treated for dehydration and minor injuries. When she was strong enough to talk, she told us everything. She had been abducted by a group posing as researchers who wanted to steal her work. They had locked her in the warehouse to pressure her into handing over her research. Rachel had managed to hide some of her most important findings before they caught her, which is why they had not yet succeeded. The police arrested the suspects, who turned out to be part of an illegal organization that targeted young, brilliant minds like Rachel's to exploit their research for profit. Thanks to Rachel's bravery and our determination, the criminals were brought to justice. Rachel's parents flew back as soon as they heard the news, and the entire town celebrated her safe return. The story made headlines, and Rachel's project gained the recognition it deserved. She was awarded several scholarships and offered positions at top universities. As for me, I'll never forget the fear and uncertainty we faced during those days. The case of the vanishing valedictorian taught us all a valuable lesson about the pressures of success and the importance of vigilance. Rachel's story serves as a reminder of the lengths people will go to protect what they've worked so hard to achieve, and the strength of friendship in the face of adversity.